Hello! It has been too long. I was gonna do a transit video 2 days ago, and Mercury Retrograde came early. I ended up breaking my microphone on accident. It was actually really funny how it happened. It just fell right exactly at the critical point, so I have a new microphone. Anyways, there's so much to talk about. There are three main things we're going to focus on for today. A lot of them overlap. First, Mercury is retrograde as of the making of this video. It started today on Friday, and we'll get into that. And Mercury's conjunct Saturn right now, and also Venus is retrograde. So there's so much to cover. Okay, first things first, typical checklist with Mercury retrograde before we go into the particulars of other things. As always, it's good to take your time. It's good to factor delays into your schedule. My refrigerator broke. Of course it did. Things break, things need upgrading, things need maybe a new little part. It needs whatever it is. Now is the time for things to not quite be able to go right as per regular scheduling of things. And that's okay. Again, it all is working out in the long run of getting new upgrades, getting new updates for technology, etc. But I think probably the best thing is it helps us to be more patient in general. It helps us to slow down, and I think that's something that's really valuable with every retrograde season, especially Mercury, which we see 3 times a year. It's an opportunity to be able to really take our time and reflect on things that have come up in the past. This is, as they say, this is not the time to start new things. It is the time to look at what has already been present in our life and to focus on that at a deeper level, to reflect, to go back, to review. This is a really, that's really what Mercury retrograde is all about, or really any kind of retrograde. So this leads to us to the Venus retrograde. By the way, I just want to say real quick, astronomically, what we mean by retrograde is essentially in a particular astronomical body's orbit, so in this case Mercury and Venus, in relation to our particular orbit here on Earth, they seem to be going backwards. Of course, they're not actually going backwards. Our solar system doesn't function like that. When the solar system formed about 4 billion years ago, here's the ecliptic on the solar system, also known as the horizontal plane of the solar system. Sun's in the center, and all these astronomical bodies, known as our planets, formed around the sun over the course of billions of, well, I think over the course of billions of years, but I think about 4 billion years ago is basically what our solar system looks like at the present time, maybe with slight variations, but it's essentially the same thing. From back then to now. So along all these orbits, sometimes astronomical bodies they're just not quite in sync with other orbits. They're not going in the same direction at the same, well, I mean, they are going in the same direction at the same time, but it seems like they're not. So here on Earth, Mercury and Venus both seem to be going backwards. So again, that's why we say we're not focused on new things at this time. We're focused on old things. We're focused on, because right now the astronomical bodies are reviewing that particular region of space, and we're focused on getting that particular region of space with the astronomical body, where we're getting those particular characteristics, those particular focuses, those particular tools we're utilizing at a finer level to be able to move forward. So we're moving backwards to move forwards. That's something I always keep in mind with Mercury retrograde. But yes, Mercury retrograde is not bad. It's not a bad thing at all. A lot of people think it is, but it's not. Or any kind of retrograde. So now we lead to the Venus retrograde. We'll get more into Mercury in a bit. But Venus retrograde has to do with relationships. So a lot of people have been reviewing, a major thing that I've been wanting to talk about for like a week and a half, but it just hasn't quite worked out because Mercury retrograde pre-shadow period, no doubt, is redefining the rules of our relationships. Mercury being conjunct Saturn, another topic for today, is a very serious energy. It's very focused on functionality. It wants to make sure that we are doing the right thing at the right people on the right path. That's basically what all of these different astronomical bodies together mean for us right now. And right now, again, with Mercury retrograde, now we're reviewing this, but Mercury and Saturn are only 3 degrees apart right now as per their conjunction. So we've been experiencing this for basically a week and a half of having a very serious, the phrase "come to Jesus" meeting. Like this is a time where we need to communicate about things that are functioning and things that are not functioning. And it can be difficult because Mercury being conjunct Saturn can limit our communication. There can still be all sorts of cognition happening in our minds, but we may not say it. And this is the time where we really need to communicate, especially when it comes to our relationships, when, again, with Venus retrograde in Capricorn, when maybe there needs to be some updating that needs to be done, where we need to communicate. We need to let other people know what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what we're experiencing. And that can be really difficult because with Mercury conjunct Saturn, there can be a sense of futility or pessimism or negative thinking or depression, even feeling like, oh, even if I say something, nothing is going to happen. Or if I say this, then they might say this. And, no matter how other people respond to necessary communication, what's most important is we do the necessary communication. And again, I think the key at this time, especially with Mercury retrograde, is just focusing on what is working and what's not working and what you would like from other people to be able to help make things work better. And this could also have to do with emotional things. This is a very logical process, but it easily could have to do with, I feel this way, can you please not do this, or can you please do this, or even just, I want you to know, I want you to understand. And I think that's something that's really important during this time, is to use I statements. I feel this, I think this, but not so much I think that you're messing up, like not so much that, but like coming from a place of where you're coming from. Because I think one other thing during this time that's really important to keep in mind is we have Mercury in Aquarius and Saturn in Aquarius. These energies in general are very good at, in particular Mercury, they're very good at being able to understand other people's minds and to get a good mental picture of what other people are thinking and how they'll respond, etc. But they don't know everything. No energy does. And especially with these particular energies in this particular conjunction, especially with Mercury retrograde, it is very easy to think that somebody else will say or respond in a particular way to something that you're telling them, and you might just be seeing it only from your perspective. Indeed, as human beings, that's what is necessarily true. We only see things from our own perspectives, but we have the power of empathy. We have the power to understand other people's minds, especially when we're understanding things like astrology or MBTI types. We're able to really figure out the nuances of other people, but we should never make the mistake, ever, of thinking that we know everything that's going on in other people's minds. So, from personal experience, I don't like to go into personal stuff too much because that's not fair to people in my personal life, but I had a really important conversation, like a tremendously life-changing, in fact, conversation 4 days ago, I think, something like that. And we're in this time frame now, and we will continue to be for especially the next, I would say the rest of January, essentially. So necessary conversations that are really heavy, really important, but again, they don't have to be like super dramatic. In fact, with all these energies, it's better for them not to be. They really need to be more logical. And I was just letting the other person know, this is how I feel. This is how I was feeling at the time. This is what I was going through. This is what I was thinking. And it wasn't a blame thing, even though there was a needed shift on their part to be able to move forward. And ultimately, they reacted so much better than I thought they would and imagined they would. So again, keep that in mind. We don't know the full picture. Even though we might think we do or think we know how it'll happen in the future, because all this Aquarius energy is very focused on the future, we don't necessarily. We have to communicate. So that's really good to keep in mind. Something that comes to mind is, and shout out to also because it's like Sun in Capricorn transit. I know that Stephen Hawking was, I can't remember his chart exactly, but I remember he was a Capricorn. I think he had Venus in Cap too, and then maybe Mercury Aquarius. I'm not sure, but there's a lot of overlap between the energies that he had and the energies that we have now. And I just read a really great quote from Stephen, which was essentially, in communication, humanity differentiated itself in its biological evolution from other animals. And all of a sudden we could share ideas and thoughts, and we were able to make impossible things happen. And essentially, there's nothing that is impossible so long as we keep communicating. And if we don't communicate, that's when all the horrible things happen. So that was pretty great timing for everything that we're experiencing. So shout out Stephen Hawking, as always. Thank you very much. Very ideal wisdom for this time. Great insight. And I think that's really the key for today, is just communicate as need be. Take your time to collect your thoughts as need be. It took me several days to get my thoughts together, and even talking to somebody else who's trusted, a loved one, to work through that stuff and get another perspective on and kind of figure out my own mind. To each their own. Not necessarily everybody needs to have that step, but this is a great time to be focused again on what works. Everything I said before, to communicate as need be. And I think the other thing for us as individuals is, even though so much of our energy and so many people's energies will be focused on relationships at this time, it's also a great time to look forward towards our own personal goals. And that's actually a good side note. We don't want to focus. I think it's really important to always stay focused on our own goals and our own visions and our own perspectives in life, our own journey, because so often it's easy to project onto other people and blow things out of proportion and cause drama, especially with the transiting Mars and Sagittarius. There's great things about that energy. There's no such thing as a bad energy. That energy is great for energy, as for like raw vigor, and momentum and excitement and fun and laughter and especially going running at this time. Beautiful. But it can potentially lead to drama, potentially. Oh, I lost my train of thought. What was it? It was good. Right. We want to make sure we don't get too caught up in relationships, because that's part of Venus retrograde too, is our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with the universe, with God. As I always like to say, these are the foundations for all other relationships. So it's easy to say, you're causing me this problem and this, when in actuality, maybe they're not. Or maybe it's not that big a deal. In fact, maybe our response is too much. So that's really important to keep in mind, is let's stay focused on our own individual future. With Mercury conjunct Saturn, that's really wonderful, especially with Mercury being retrograde. Now we get to get the fine details, whatever the vast infinite vision that we've had for our lives. For me, for example, I'm going to be focused on editing the book. I'm so excited. I have been, but now it's the time period to really delve into it, and it's lovely. So whatever your long-term project is, your long-term vision, this is a great time to continue to work forward with it. But again, like editing, it is progress, but I have to go back to go forward. I have to review what I've already written, distill it, get it all together, and then move forward. And I planned this a couple of months ago, so timing-wise, it all works out. But whatever it is that we're experiencing, it's not to say, again, generally it's not good to start new things, but even if you're going into new phases, really stay focused on the past and really stay focused on where you're coming from, because that's going to help you to figure out where you're going. It's a little counterintuitive, when you're moving in this direction, it's kind of disconcerting to look backwards. Obviously, to some extent, we want to be looking forwards, but it is really important. It's look forward. Okay, cool. Where has my past been? And then look forward. Okay, where has my past been? Etc. So there's that. I think last things is we have a moon in Cancer weekend, so it's also the full moon. The moon is going to be inspiring all of us to stay close to family. There might be even more of a focus on those particular relationships, whether there's something to talk about or whether things are just enjoyable. Maybe everything's already been talked about. Then moon opposite Venus retrograde and sun and whatnot. It's going to be very lovely for this weekend, if a bit intense. As always, it's a full moon, so all the more reason to not project, of course, and to express ourselves and to be excited about whatever it is that we're working on. And one last thing, it's good to keep in mind with these retrogrades, in particular Mercury retrograde and Aquarius conjunct Saturn, is a lot of the work that can be done during this time is mentally, is also through communication, of course, but a lot of it is going to be mental. So figuring out, especially when it is the time to communicate, make sure that you mentally have figured out what it is that you're trying to say, why you're trying to say it, what the goal is, and that will be really helpful. And just in general, it has nothing to do with communication, just kind of communicating with yourself, getting the vision right, getting all your ideas and insights right. That'll help you to move forward. I think that's everything. It's a lot. Sorry, I didn't mean to not do videos. I tried. But it all worked out. Infinite love to you, my friends. As always, I'm doing readings. As always, I'm doing a free 15-minute reading for a Yelp review. I'm still plugging away at those. So yeah, in the description is info to book a reading with me. I'm happy to read for anybody who is open-minded and just has questions, or doesn't even have questions, just wants to hear what's going on with their chart, MBTI type, whatever they like. Infinite love to you, my friends. Namaste. Peace.